go. It's good to see everyone this morning. Been asked about my rope. This is a rope the young people made a couple of years ago in Vacation Bible School. And this is just kind of for a reminder. The class Wednesday night gave Wes and Scout a small piece of this rope and tied on their luggage so they can identify their luggage. You know, they're in El Salvador this morning. Okay. And so told them we'd be holding on the other end of the rope. So while they're there, let's continue praying for Scout and Wes and their work there in El Salvador. It's a peaceful time there, so it is a good chance, a good opportunity for them to be able to preach the gospel and make a difference in people's hearts and minds. So we begin our class. Fred, will you lead us in a prayer, please?
Let's all bow. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and all the many blessings you send upon us. We thank you especially for this first day of the week that we have to gather together and study another portion of your word and partake of the emblems that represent your death, burial, and resurrection on the first day of the week. We ask you to be with each and everything that we do here today. Help it to be in accordance with thy will, and be with Doyle and all the other Bible class teachers. Help them have ready remembrance of the things they've prepared. Forgive us and be with us always. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Has anyone heard of the name John Clayton? John Clayton. No one. Good. I'll put it that way. That is a good thing. Because John Clayton is a theistic evolutionist. He was a member of the church, but this is whenever I was a young boy. Growing up, I was growing up in the 70s, late 60s and 70s. And in church, the word dinosaur was not said. Because it was one of those things, they're mythological. We don't talk about dinosaurs, and we're not sure if they're real or not. And it's about that time that the evolutionists took hold of the dinosaur as their poster child. And so, look, millions of years ago, the dinosaur existed. And man and dinosaur could not possibly live together. Well, John Clayton was an evolutionist that as he began studying and looking at the creation around him and all the things, he said, there's got to be a God. And he was converted to Christianity. But he brought a lot of the evolutionist background with him. And as he was struggling with it, he's a scientist, he was a teacher, very learned man. He tried to marry evolution and creation together, known as theistic evolution. In a nutshell, theistic evolution believes that the creation order, and God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth, those days are going to be long periods of time. And over long periods of time, God evolved and created these things and tried to marry them together. And I remember when I was in college, one of these things, you don't talk about dinosaurs. We don't really know they're mythical things. But more and more started thinking about, hearing about it. They're finding all these fossils, all these evidence of dinosaurs. We went and heard John Clayton speak. Does God exist? It was fantastic. I was going, God does exist. And he talked about dinosaurs too, and how God created the dinosaurs and things like that. And I was going, yes, what a breath of fresh air. But then he came in, he started talking about how God used these millions of years in every day to come up to the point where as things evolved. And within his theistic evolution, and his evolutionist mindset, is that man and dinosaur could not possibly live together. Why? Dinosaurs are so big and bad, they would kill people, and they couldn't live and survive together. And so the two couldn't be together. And now, in time, I guess it's In the Shadow of Darwinism. It was written by Wayne Jackson and Bert Thompson. Maybe you've heard those names. And they've, in a loving way, caring way, tried to reach out to him and show him how he's allowed evolution to influence his thinking and his beliefs. Last I heard, he has not repented of that. I've asked around, I have not heard that. He is, at the time I was in college, I thought he was an old man. He's probably as old as Joe Caesar. He's a really old guy, right? So, but understand, he's still living, and he's still involved in this, and it's still been a plea to him to look and see, instead of trying to adapt the creation to evolution be a creation. God created the heavens and the earth. And in 6 literal days, God created the heavens and the earth. Of course, that's going to be another whole study when we want to look and see how that is established. But to know and believe that we can, instead of living on an earth that is billions of years old, because evolution, to evolve all that time, would take millions of billions of years for their plan to come about. Whenever we, ourselves as we look at it, we have a God who spoke, and he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God formed man out of the dust of the earth, breathed into his nostrils a breath of life. He became a living being. We can believe the words that's recorded in Genesis as true and accurate, and God created the heavens and the earth in that way. And there's a lot of things, a lot of science, a lot of things discussed in that way. But as you begin looking, could dinosaurs and man live together at the same time? When I was in India, I went with Herschel back in 2017 or 18 on a tourist visa. We had to go do some tourism, and we went to these Hindu shrines, the ancient. They said, "Oh, these are thousands of years old," which a lot of things are thousands of years old. And while we were there, and I was looking through and looking at it, I came across this little carving in those rocks. Does that look like something maybe is not what we would see in ordinary today? Very likely, I believe it's going to be a Carapasaurus, something like that. I'm not really sure exactly. But how could they have carved that if they hadn't seen that or been described that? We can ask ourselves. In Utah, I believe this one is, and is found in Utah. These petroglyphs, as they write there as they draw on these stones. You can see the little man there. You could also look. There's going to be a goat over here, and there's going to be different animals around. But there's a very, very pretty clear picture of an Apatosaurus, is it not? Man living at the same time, believed to be done anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years ago. So, man being together at the same time as dinosaurs. We can look also, and this is going to be in Cambodia, made back in 1,100 something AD. It's a temple type thing carved out of the solid rock on the side of the mountain, and have all kinds of depictions of animals and things. But one of the depictions is, and if you do I have one of those? Oh, I didn't bring my my Stegosaurus with me. Got to be a Stegosaurus, no doubt about it. And we could talk about a lot of things, from footprints found in dinosaurs' footprints in the mud. We can talk about all kinds of things that point to the fact that man and dinosaurs lived together. But when you come to the book of Job and we find God describing these creatures that no doubt are going to be some huge, massive things that being described as a dinosaur, that man and dinosaurs in the time of Job, they were living together and they functioned together. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along in our class. But as we begin our class, let's go to Job chapter number 40 is where we left off last week. In Job chapter number 40. And going to kind of back up, we'll start with verse number 1 and get a running start in it. We find God has just appeared to Job in a whirlwind. And speaking to him, he comes to the point now, he says, "Okay, Job, let's..." And as he spoke to him, he talked about the different things of creation, weather, mountains, and things like that. And also talked about amazing animals. What do you know about these animals? And this is Job's reply. We're at verse number 1. "Moreover, then the Lord answered Job and said, Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him?" So, and I think some translation, will a fault finder, here Job, you're being a fault finder, will you come against me and argue against me, make a complaint, to quarrel with me? Will you do this? Actually, he's saying, Job, you're trying to tell me what to do, giving me that instruction. He who rebukes, the one who's judging, Job is taking upon that judgment role. He rebukes God, let him answer. Let him answer it. Looking at the argument that God's just presented in chapter number 39. Do you have an answer, Job? You ready to give an answer for what you've seen? Verse 3. Job, this is what he's been waiting for a long time. He's been saying, just give me a few minutes with God. Let me talk to God about this. Let me ask God, ask him, why are these things happening to me? Let me talk to God. And then Job answered in verse number 3, the Lord, and said, behold, I'm vile. The word there, I'm insignificant. I'm small count. There's nothing in me. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. I have no reply. There's nothing I can say. Verse 5, once I have spoken, but I will not answer. So I have no answer. Yes, twice, but I'll proceed no farther. There's nothing else I can add to it. So Job is recognizing that he is insignificant. He's vile. But what he's not acknowledging is some of the statements that he's made as he's made these accusations of God, and those accusations have been rash. And of course, you say, well, he's been in a lot of pain. Yeah, but they've still been rash. They've been incorrect. And now he's saying, I'm not going to say any more. But God says that's not enough, Job. You can't just say, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm nothing to say. No, it takes more than that. It takes more than God's going to call for him not just to have silence, but Job, you've got to trust me. Because you go through times, you can say, I don't know what's going to happen. So instead of us saying, God, why are you trust in God. God says, I want you to trust in me and seek to be right with God and all that. Verse number 6. Then the Lord answered Job. So here Job said, I'm not going to say a thing. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, so God speaking out of the whirlwind. You remember this is where we left off last week and I put that hook. You remember different events that God spoke to people through natural physical things. You remember there in Exodus chapter number 3, Moses went to go see a what? Burning bush. Take off your sandals. You are on holy ground. Imagine he approaches the presence of God as God then speaks to Moses from the burning bush. Now God is speaking in this realm. Of course, this would be before the burning bush. You look chronological order. God's speaking to Job in a tornado, in this massive hurricane type thing. And as he's speaking to Job, and Job's listening, and he's talking to God, he's recognizing what God's saying. This is where, again, Doyle kind of gets out there and gets kind of crazy about things. What would it have been like? What would it have been like to discuss and have a conversation with God as God speaks to you out of a whirlwind? And I propose you think about it. Perhaps, you remember the event where there was a whirlwind? And I think I mentioned this last week. The whirlwind where Elijah and Elisha were going. They crossed the Jordan, took his cloak. The Jordan parted and they walked across. And he says, if you see me when I depart, you'll have 3 times my blessing upon you. And sure enough, a chariot, fiery chariot came, going to run over them, right? What did it do? It departed them. And as the cloak was dropped and Elisha stood there and looked at Elijah, a whirlwind, not the fiery chariot, but a whirlwind took Elijah up and out of his presence. Of course, that's why later on they said, let's go look for the body. Maybe he fell off somewhere else. But Elisha said, no, God's taking him. Oh, no, and he allowed them to go look. You remember that event as it played out. But perhaps, and we don't know this, doesn't say this, but did God use that whirlwind, that tornado, to take Job up and start showing him some of these things? See, here, Job, you see these things? I think we can get to see some evidence of perhaps that as we get into chapter 41. But this was a magnificent event, not to be downplayed at all, as God was speaking to Job to help him understand what was taking place. Verse number 7. Now prepare yourself like a man. Gird your loins, brace yourself, dress for action. Young man, pull up your pants. You ever have to tell that to your boys as they're, pull your pants up, got to pull your pants up. You hear that diaper starting to sag, pull the pants up. It's almost like a child. He's saying, you need to dress yourself like it's time to pull your pants up. It's time to give an answer for what you've been saying, what you've done. I will question you In this question, I think the King James Version says, I'm going to demand you. You're going to have to answer. You're going to have to cowboy up here. Let's see. I'll commend you, and then I look up and I lose my place. And you shall answer me. You're the one who's going to instruct me. You're the one who's going to tell me. Verse number 8. Would you indeed annul my judgment? So would you say that I am wrong? Are you saying then that my judgment and what he's done is to be wiped away? Would you condemn? Job, would you proclaim guilty me that you may be justified? See, this is the danger we fall into. Here we are, we're saying, look at me, what's taking place, and we'll point God and say, why have you done this? And you're saying that you have done this to me, and God says, are you going to blame me for something like this? Who are you to blame or to look at me and say that I am wrong, when actually God, of course, is always in the right. And you remember Job had accused God of not being just. Remember Elihu in chapter 32, as he said, as Elihu spoke, he said, chapter 32, verse 2. Then the wrath of Elihu, the son of Barakachai, the Bezite of the family of Ram, aroused against Job. His wrath was aroused because he, that is Job, justified himself rather than God. Now, remember early on it says Job did not sin with his lips. It didn't say he never sinned with his lips, but up to that point he had not sinned with his lips. Now, in the time since then, he has. To sin, remember what sin is. Sin is when we see this is what God wants of us, and we fail to do what God wants. He has failed to do what God wants. And we're going to find later that he is ready to repent of those things. But he has done what is wrong. So God's calling him out on that. And he's going to ask him, as he addresses him, consider the power that God has. Consider his voice. Verse number 9. Have you an arm like God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? I've been known to have a big voice, but you've heard some people, as they speak, the whole room is filled with their voice. Sorry, Mark, he's back there going, turn her down. And do we have a voice like God? No way. No way. What about the strength of God? I was watching the fireman's competition on YouTube the other day, and I saw a guy from Conroe up there, and he was pulling his hang up. Boy, he was hauling up. He had strong arms. Is his arms as strong as God's? No. And here God said, Job, where's your strength? Where's your power? Where's your voice? Verse number 10. So if you have that power, you have that voice, then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor, and clothe or array yourself with glory and beauty. Put on all the royal garb of majesty, Job. If you're ready to play God, in which you're saying, I'm justified in God, you're not justified in doing this, are you ready to dress up like God does? I think of the dress of the royal robe. You remember back in Acts chapter number 12, the last part of the chapter is here Herod as appears before them. And it says that he's arrayed, and the sun was coming up and shone upon him, and the glory that, remember, then he was eaten by worms and died. You remember his son and his daughter who were married together, Agrippa and Bernice, as they came before and Paul came to present the truth to them and says they came with all kind of pomp. You think of all the glory and all the pomp that you can be dressed of. Job, put on all the majesty that you can. And what do you look at? Kind of pales the significance of the strength of God and the beauty and the glory of God. Job, you're not going to have it. It says array or clothe yourself with beauty, with glory and beauty, or splendor, with honor, with majesty. Here, Job, it's time for you to dress up and play God. Pull your pants up, Job. You get to play God. Verse number 11. Here you have a job. If you're going to dress up and play God, this is what you've got to do. Verse number 11. Disperse, and the word disperse here means to begin pouring out. Just pour out where it just goes and just flows out. Here, you're going to cast all this out. Cast the rage of your wrath. your anger. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. Job, your job is you look around and you see who is guilty, who is wrong. And Job, you get to pour out your wrath on them. Job, can you do that? Pour out your wrath on them. Verse number 12. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Humble him. Tread down the wicked in their place. So where the wicked are standing, while they're just kind of standing there, you take care of them, Job. You're ready to be God. You put on that splendor. You have that mighty arm. You be God, and you can be the one who places this judgment on them. Verse 13. It gets interesting here. It says, hide, or perhaps to bury them in the dust together, bind their faces in hidden darkness. Job, you put them in the grave. You go ahead and kill them, Job. Cover them up with the dust, and you take their life. Job, are you ready to take on that responsibility? Are you, as you're considering as you are questioning me as God, are you ready to do this? And when you have when you are as God, then you can carry out the justice that God has to carry out on the people there. Verse 14, God's still speaking. Then I will confess. He's going to give the confession. He's going to acknowledge to Job, to you, that your own right hand can save you. Job, when you have the majesty and the power and the strength of God, when you can carry out justice and look and know what's going on and be able to bring that judgment and carry your wrath out, when you're able to do that, then Job, maybe you'll have the ability to save yourself. Job, guess what? You can't. You can't. You do not have that. Job doesn't have the power to carry out the duties of God, and we don't, as he didn't, have the right to question God. And as Job is saying, I'm not going to say anything, but no, Job, it's time for you to go beyond not just saying anything. It's, Job, you put your trust in God. God, you're the one in control. It's not me. God, you're the one in control. Verse number 15. The discussion that God presents to Job is going to go back to the creatures that God has created. But this time he's just going to look at two more. And this is why I have the dinosaurs on the front of my podium, right? This is why this morning I woke up singing, God made the dinosaurs big and tall. Oh, God. And I've just always enjoyed, I've enjoyed dinosaurs for a long time, at least when I began to understand more about them. So here we find in verse number 15, as it turns back to God's creation, we're going to first of all look at the behemoth. Chapter 41 is going to be dedicated completely to one creature, and that's going to be to the Leviathan. Now, the behemoth, you say, well, he's a land creature, and the Leviathan is a sea creature, but really both of them spend a lot of time in water. Some spend some time on land. So they're creatures that God has made, regardless of what it looks at, they are fantastic, awesome creations. Monstrous, you could say. Beyond our ability as human beings to begin wrapping our minds around how awesome and how great they are. It's, I guess you could say, the example of the superiority of God and the heavenly creatures, His creations, compared to us. Can we begin to look and see how great God is? Begin to look at God's great creations. Now, to begin with, as we look at Job and he's described the behemoth, they are not figurative beings. It's not just God's making these things up to make it look like these things. Because you know what that would mean if God just made them up? Well, I can tell a pretty good story, Joe. I can tell you about all kinds of things that you could do. No, this is a real creature. These are real beings. And if it wasn't, if God couldn't point and look to these real beings, God's argument here would be completely worthless. So we can know that these are true, actual beings. Now, we ask our question as we start looking at these beings, we're going to find a lot of people have tried to describe them away, where they're not actually what they really are. I think Joe made a mention, we're going to be looking at the hippopotamus this morning as we look at the behemoth, right? And we say, oh, that can't be the hippopotamus. But there have been lots of translations that translate it as hippopotamus. You'll even look at in the Strong's the Strong Bible Dictionary will translate as a hippopotamus or an elephant or something like that. But you get into Brown Driver Briggs, which is probably much thorough and better Bible dictionary. It's going to describe it just what it is. It's a dinosaur-like animal, a big, huge creature. But so why do scholars want to say, they weren't a dinosaur? Number one, they would have to go back and say, well, man and dinosaurs did live together, because Job was there and he saw these dinosaurs. And if you say that they are dinosaurs, then man and dinosaurs had to live together, which is interesting. Did man and dinosaurs live together? Well, if you believe in the Bible, you'll see that on day 6, God created the animals and he created man on the 6th day. So we can know that we human beings did coincide with dinosaurs. Let's see if yes. Anybody know what that is? An iguana. Anybody ever have an iguana growing up, or your kids have an iguana? Oh, you're missing out if you've never had an iguana. We had Iggy. Iggy was our iguana when the kids were growing up, and he was just a little lizard when we got him. And time he passed from this life, he was a big creature. I mean, he got a chunk of firewood, which he ended up like a chunk of firewood. But we moved out in the country, and matter of fact, I was texturing the walls one time, and he was on the edge of his cage, and it got texture on him. And he wore that texture until he shed his skin. And he got. But Iggy, we finally put him out, a nice hot summer day, put him out so he could enjoy some sunshine, and he got out. Iggy, we'd see him every once in a while. He'd come, we'd have some ducks, and he'd come and eat out of the duck food, but we'd try to, he'd be gone. We didn't find Iggy until, guess what? That first cold spell. You know how we found him? He was a piece of firewood underneath a tree. He fell out of the tree, and he got frozen. They don't do very good in the cold climates. But you say, why are you talking about an iguana? You see, iguanas have little teeth. And back in the 1800s, about 1840, I think, a scientist was out in a rock digging thing where they dug out rocks, and he looked, he found a fossil, and that fossil, the size of a softball, was just like an iguana tooth. And began finding some more fossils like that. Now, you say, well, what is a fossil? If you don't know what a fossil is, let me give you a little background. A fossil is created when there's about 3 different ways fossils are made. But basically, it's where the calcium or rock material comes in and takes over, and it turns into a rock. You see this rock right here? This came from my backyard. Bill kind of shined it up a little bit for me. This is petrified wood. And how did wood become a rock? Well, as it's a lot of pressure, just the right temperatures and the moisture and the minerals pass from it into the material, unless the material is not strong enough and it rots and decays. So now, skin, is it going to fossilize? No, that old nose and the cartilage around it, it'll rot and decay. Well, what about the bones around there? It's hard enough, and it will take on the calcium. It'll become hard. That's, in a very simplistic way, how fossils are created. There are dinosaur fossils found literally all over the world. And the more they find them, the more credible they are. We'll talk some more about those in just a little bit. But this was back in 1840. The guy said, we're going to call this an iguanodon. And the iguana and iguanodon, you kind of get it. But they also, what are we going to, and they started finding all these others and putting them together and finding all kinds of amazing things as they're beginning to put these fossils together. And they said, well, what are we going to call these creatures? They had to have been a terrible lizard. Dinosaur means terrible lizard. The word was coined in the 1800s. When was the King James Version originally written, translated? 1611, I believe, was when it was translated. It would have been over 200 years before the word dinosaur was even coined. So as you come to this creature we'll be looking at here in Job, the word dinosaur was even in our part of our vocabulary until 100 years later. So as we're looking at the way it has evolved, it does point out that this creature that's being described is going to look a lot like the creature that we see on the screen here. And whether it be a Diplodocus, a Patasaurus, I like to think maybe a Seismosaurus. Seismosaurus, big, really heavy thing. And by the way, this is my Diplodocus. So it would have been some massive, big creature. So as we look at this and we find about fossils and things, it's going to be really incredible. Verse number 15, we're going to look at a dinosaur. Look, or behold, now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. When did he make this behemoth alongside of man? Day 6 of creation. Exodus chapter number 20 is going to tell us as well that for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and in 6 days all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So in 6 days God created all things, and on that seventh day he rested. So the sixth day he created the dinosaurs just as he created man. And this dinosaur, the behemoth, he eats grass like an ox. See now his strength are in his hips or in his loins. Elephant's strength is going to be in its neck and shoulders. This creature's strength is going to be in his belly, in his loins, the belly muscles, as it goes on to describe. The power is in his stomach or his belly muscles. Now, the King James Version will say navel, which is probably not the best translation there, because we think of a navel, we think of a belly button. It's not that, but it's the area that's found there where the strength is. He moves his tail like a cedar. Some say his tail sways like a cedar, or I think ESV says it's stiff like a cedar, which is probably not one of the better translations either. But we see this big, huge tail. This tail is described as a cedar. Now you start looking at the cedars in Lebanon, they would be probably equivalent to a lot of the trees here, 70 to 80 feet tall. There'd be some trees that are 90 feet. Where's our people in the woods? You've seen those big trees, right? This tail is a huge tail being described here. It goes on. Verse number 17 describes business like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. So here he is. He is a solidly built, it's not going to move creature. And I know as Twyla and I, as we get our crochet needles out and we start crocheting that, we knit it together. And now you pull it, maybe with one string you could pull it out, right? But you pull it, it becomes one solid piece of fabric. You're not going to come apart with it, are you? It's going to be held together. So here, you're not going to tear this creature apart. It is knit and it pulled together. This big, huge tail goes on. He describes verse 18. His bones are like beams, or these tubes, these strong pieces of bronze. His ribs, or his limbs, describing the long pieces or long bones, are like bars of iron. This is one big, awesome creature, and he's so very strong, not going to be moved. Verse number 19. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. He is the first. He's the chief. He's the foremost. He's at the very top. The word Rosh, which is in the Hebrew language, is very akin to this word, but it describes the very top of the mountain. He is up there in the things that God has created. He is first in the ways or the works of God. All that God works, all that God has done. And who's going to bring a sword against him? Only God is the one. Only God's the one who can approach him in battle and control him or kill him. Verse number 20. Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. So, okay, one of those things that the other beasts don't seem like they're too very afraid of him, are they? He's probably a more docile kind of creature. He's not one that's going to be breathing fire out against you. We'll talk about that later. So what is this creature? There's going to be, very unlikely he's carnivorous. He's not carnivorous. He's the word is not omnivore, but herbivore, right? He's a herbivore. He eats green stuff. He lies under the lotus trees in a covert or hidden under a shelter in the shade there. We're going to find reeds in the marsh. We're going to find this an area that would be a swampy area, a lot of water, mire type thing. The lotus trees cover him with their shade. They shadow him. The willows by the brook surround him. Here he is. He just lays low. When he eats all the green stuff he wants. He's just eating it. Now, you start looking at fantastic things. You start looking at dinosaurs. You begin looking at, they have actually discovered the fossilized dinosaurs with fossilized food in their stomach. Wow, pretty incredible. Depending on where these dinosaurs are found, it's going to depend what they find that was in their stomach that's been fossilized. Is that incredible? But here they are. There's some that have only vegetables in them, only leafy things. Maxine, you can relate that, can't you? But then you find others that are, that are carnivorous. But there are those who are this herbivore. So describing how he is, he's laying low. So as a creature that God's made, not really fearful, other things can be around him. Verse number 23. Indeed, or behold, get your attention here. If the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. The river begins thundering, or it's turbulent. He's not disturbed. Batzel, you've been where a river's gone through and wiped things out, haven't you? And the power that water can have. Here's a creature, here it comes again, just blows over and he's not disturbed. He can stand his ground. Incredible, a creature that could do such as that. And of course, describing that strength. But it says he's not disturbed, he's not afraid, he's not trembling, he's not frightened about it, he's not alarmed, he hastens not. He's right there. He is cool as a cucumber, this big, huge thing. It says he is confident, he's secure, he's trusting that though the Jordan gusheth into his mouth. So when that water comes flowing and rushing down, he just leans against it and is able to become that huge rock in the middle of the river, right? Fantastic creature is he's able to stand up against these things. Verse number 24 is kind of interesting here as we look at this and exactly what it may mean. We'll examine it a little bit. Though he takes it in his eyes, or one pierces his nose with a snare. So if all these things take place, he said, what will be? Now, it could mean when he takes it in his eyes, it could be, and I think the American Standard Version, this would be the 1906 model, or I think it was, shall anyone take him when he is on watch? So it describes his eyes. When he's watching, nobody's going to touch him. And he's watching and looking. You're not going to touch him when he's on watch. Or one pierces his nose with a snare. Here it is. Is he going to use some bait to get him and catch him? He's looking, you're not going to get me. So I think pierce is also described as a barb, which would be a thing you pierce them and hold them and pull them back. The strength you have. As we look at this word, this creature called the behemoth, before we go into chapter 41, it's actually a plural. Behemoth is plurality, describing one creature. Commonly, when something is in plurality in the Hebrew language, referring to one thing, it means that it is big. It is huge within itself. Now, the word literally means a beast, and it's used in singular nouns and pronouns and such. But being in plurality, it would mean being big. In Psalm 104, verse 14, is the singular use of it. It says, talking about God, He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and vegetation for service of man, that he may bring forth food from the earth. So this is behemoth, which is a singular. So it might be a cow, or it might be some big mountain goat or something. God's created these things. But when you talk about the behemoth, it is in plurality, and it is a big, huge creature. So, not an elephant, not a crocodile, not a hippopotamus. And we could talk about there in the Nile River of how they have, when they draw pictures, hieroglyphs, the drawing in Egypt, they'll see them actually attacking and killing a hippopotamus known as the water ox, I believe it's referred to. So it's not going to be that. We're looking at, imagine a Seismosaurus weighing 50 tons. Now, a ton is how many pounds? 2,050 tons. That is a lot of flesh, a lot of animal there. Big, huge things being described. And that's going to be a Seismosaurus. Diplodocus is going to top out more like 30 tons, but big, big creatures. Now, there's really not going to be a pause so much in the going from the behemoth to the Leviathan. It's going to be another creature, but God's going to take Job right on through to this next creature. But we're going to find that entire chapter 41, is of the Leviathan. Anybody have any comments or thoughts? I know that first bell's rung. We're about ready to go to chapter 41. Have any thoughts about this behemoth, this great creature? And you think, God is the great creator of all things. This is one of my wife's favorite. Now, this is what? Anybody seen something like this that are about the size of a large turkey? Anybody seen something like that? It's called a frilled lizard. God, when He creates things, He does really good. Really cool. And we say, well, why did He do this? Well, that's to attract a mate. Have the skin coming out to attract a mate. Perhaps it's to help cool him off, all different kinds of things. But God has made them just the way He needs it. And this being a Spinosaurus, I have a mountain bike trail that has, I call the Spinosaurus, and it's the thing, I go and I ride my bicycle and I go around on the Spinosaurus. I like to be creative like that. But God, as He's created things, He's done it magnificently and awesomely. And we get to talk about the Leviathan this next week, as it describes the Leviathan and his ability to move. It's going to be incredible as we look at these things. But God, His purpose now. Let's stop and look at His purpose. Again, anybody have something to say? Fred's been not had much job handing out the mic. I do all the talking. Anybody, any comments? But as we look, God is doing this to show that as He's the one who's able to make these creatures, He's showing my wisdom is over all wisdom. Job, you think you have a gripe, you think you have a problem, you have a question against God? God says, I'm the one who's made these things. You have no right, any ground to stand upon saying, why have you done this? Because God says, I'm the one who's created all things. I'm the one who's done these things. You begin contrasting our ignorance, our not knowing, to God and His complete understanding. We've got to trust God. God is the one who's all-powerful, not us. Now, as we get to the Leviathan, anything? Anybody have anything? Your favorite dinosaur? Anybody have a favorite dinosaur? I've got lots of them. The Titanoboa, that's a pretty cool one. Anybody know what a Titanoboa is? Think Titanoboa. What is a boa? A boa constrictor? It was a huge snake. Its diameter was about 6 to 8 feet. Of course, they didn't find all but the jaws because the rest of it, soft material and some of the spine. Huge snake. All these great things that God has created, God is able to make, and God's given us to show us of His wonders and of His majesty and His awesomeness. So the behemoth and now the Leviathan. And again, these creatures are actual creatures. Not just something made up, but something that was real, something that they would have seen, they would have known. Otherwise, the argument would have been mute. I mean, how can you argue something that's not real? But God pointed to these saying, God is the one who has created these things. And now the Leviathan, talk about a terrible lizard. Talk about something that is so fantastic. I look forward to getting into it next week if the Lord's willing. So thank you for your attention. And we'll get to that this next week with the Leviathan.